strong platform. It has given me a lot of opportunities.
We train the students not just only in the clinicals, but also on how to work in the laboratories.
Our teachers and faculty, everybody has been so supportive. I've never felt like a foreigner in this place. Around 500 patients per day visit the JSS Dental College.
The research microscope has additional attachments like the phase contrast microscopy, dark field microscopy, fluorescent microscopy, and image analysis with camera attachments.
We are able to treat the patient at the lowest cost.
Have focused particularly a care for special children, of which JSS Smile is one of the focus areas.
We have good number of collections in our library.
The environment of the hostel is really good and we feel secure here. Providing each and every day healthy and hygienic food for us. Our university has provided us with many sports facilities and gymnastic facilities to maintain our fitness. To be the best, choose the best. Choose JSS Dental College and Hospital and feel the difference.
JSS Dental College is one of the premier institutions looked for graduation and post-graduation by many students.
JSS Dental College and Hospital is a extremely wonderful facility for the students and also for the patients to get the best of the care.
Good morning to everyone, seeking the divine blessings of His Holiness Swamiji, Dr. Sunil Kumar, Dr. Annapurna, head of the department, conservative dentistry, faculties, and dear participants. I'm very happy. I first and foremost, I welcome our resource person, Dr. Sunil Kumar Chinni, for this webinar. And I also congratulate and compliment Conservative Department for organizing a webinar on selection of research topic. Research has become a part of academics, and nowadays research is linked up to the institutional accreditations, and it also speaks on the quality of the institutions. And nowadays, the research has been aligned with sustainable goals, sustainable developmental goal, that is SDG. As we know that there are 17 goals, which is adopted by United Nations to ward off poverty and to protect the planet and ensure that all people will enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. So our research should also align with these SDG goals, if not 17, at least 1 or 2 goals. And keeping this in mind, our research should not end up with only publication. It should also reach to the common man. With these few words, I welcome all the participants, and once again, I welcome our resource person for this webinar. On behalf of JSS Dental College and JSS Academy of Higher Education, I welcome all of you to this webinars. I thank the organizers for inviting me. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, and thank you, sir. Right now, we have got more than 600 registration for this webinar, and I thank them all for taking the first step to start their journey towards the research. For those who have just joined us now, I welcome you again. Moving on quickly, we have us with today Dr. Sunil Kumar Chinni, who is my friend, professional colleague, and my senior during our undergraduate studies around 20 years back. I am happy to introduce Dr. Sunil Kumar Chinni, who is currently working as a professor and postgraduate guide in Department of Conservative Dentistry and Endodontics at Narayana Dental College and Hospital, Nellore. His area of interest is clinical research and has given several lectures at national level on this topic. He has many publications to his credit at national and international journals. His publications on systematic review have been published in reputed journals, international journals like Journal of Endodontics and Journal of Indian Society of Prosthodontics. He received second best prize in systematic review and meta-analysis competition in 2019, conducted by Indian Prosthodontic Society. He has received travel grant from the department CICS Chennai for presenting poster at 19th World Congress on Dental Traumatology at Brisbane, Australia in 2016. Around 15 randomized clinical trials have been registered in CTRI under his guidance. I am glad that Dr. Sunil accepted our invitation to share his experience in selecting the research topic. Participants who are having any questions during the webinar, just type them in the question and answer chat box. At the end of the webinar, post it to the speaker during the panel discussion. I now request Dr. Sunil to continue.
Thank you, Paras. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Thank you.
Before starting my lecture, I would like to thank management of JSS Dental College and the hospital for giving this opportunity as a panel keynote speaker. And I would like to thank Dr. Ravindra sir and Dr. Annapurna ma'am for giving this opportunity. And my beloved friend, Dr. Paras, for giving, for inviting me for this lecture.
Thank you.
Paras, shall I start, Paras?
Yes, you can start sharing your slide and we can continue.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome all for today's topic of presentation, selection of research topic. And I welcome all the delegates for this presentation. And I'm Dr. Sunil Kumar Chinni, working as professor in the Department of Conservative Dentistry and Endodontics at Narayana Dental College and Hospital. So this is my institution where I am working currently. At the end of this lecture, you will learn how to frame research question along with PICOs, and you know how to conduct a study based on a study design, and what are the standard protocols for each study design. So it is more of interactive session. I recommend everyone please keep a notebook and a pen, and when it is like working together with the lecture, it is not direct lecture, so we'll have a small exercises so that when you're working with this, you'll be able to know what is a research question and what is a PICOS, what are the different study designs and what are the protocols for the study designs. So a research topic. So as a postgraduate or anybody else, what do you mean by research topic? It is an integrated part for your post-graduation education. For example, as a part of your PG curriculum, you need to do a dissertation and submit it to the university. So that dissertation topic is, when you want to select a topic for your dissertation, that is your research topic. And when you have to present a paper presentation or a poster presentation at conference, you need to do a smaller studies. So for this, you have to select some research, some topics, so that you have to get your approval from your guide. So those topics are nothing but your research topics. It is not something different. So whatever you are going to do, your dissertation or any study for your paper or any poster presentation, so or for your conferences, all these things comes for under research topic. So where does it start? The starting point is research question. You have to have a question should be framed, and that question should be clearly framed, and it has to include all the elements like exposure, outcome, what you are looking for, and intervention, or if not diagnostic study, means a diagnostic element or etiological agent. All these things need to be there in that research question as a part of research question. And then once you frame the research question and you are doing the study, and then you're completing your dissertation, or you are giving it back as a paper presentation or a poster presentation, that is not going to be end. So where you're going to end your research, once you started with the research question, what is the end point for that? So most of the students will be thinking like, I finished my dissertation, so done. So I have done my job. And once they passed out, they will submit it to the department and they go. Or if they do it for paper presentation, they go for conference and present the paper and come back and then done. That is, I have done my paper presentation, it is over. No, that is not your end point. Your end point is publication. Unless and until whatever research question you have taken and whatever study you have done, you don't publish it, it is not ended. So if it is there in the form of your paper or poster presentation or in your dissertation, it will be there in your department only. It is not known to the rest of the world. Whatever study you have done, whatever case you have done, if you want to share it with the rest of the world, you need to publish it. Once you publish your work, that is your end point. Unless and until you don't publish it, then you have not completed your study. So keep this in mind before starting any of your research study. So the ultimate aim should be publication, not for paper or poster presentation or a dissertation submission. Because most of the things, 80% to 70% of the students, they have that enthusiasm of doing the study and presenting it or submitting it as dissertation and leave it at that point. So don't keep that one as your endpoint. Keep your endpoint as publication. Then your work will be shared or it will be seen with the rest of the world. That is a very important point. So the endpoint is publication, not dissertation submission or paper or poster presentation. So to start with a clear question, we need to have a PICOS. So what do you mean by PICOS? So PICOS is P stands for patient or a problem. So you're going to define the condition of interest. If what patients or what patient problem you are studying, you're going to define in your question. And then I is intervention. It need not be an intervention. It can be an etiological agent, or it can be a prognostic factor, or it can be a diagnostic test, or it can be a case. Anything will be depending on the type of the study, what you are doing. If it is an etiological based study, etiological agent will be there. If it is a diagnostic based study, a diagnostic test will be there. If it is an intervention will be there. If it is a prognostic study, a prognostic factor will be there. So I varies depending on the type of the study or the type of the study what you are doing. And the next one is C. C is comparison. Any alternative to your intervention or your diagnostic factor or your prognostic factor or your treatment, any alternative to that you are looking for in the study. And O is outcome, primary outcome and secondary outcome. So primary outcome and secondary outcome you need to define at the start of your study, and there is no standard things like this should be the primary outcome and another one is the secondary outcome. For example, a secondary outcome of one study might be a primary outcome in another study. So it is up to the researcher what he is looking for becomes their primary outcome and secondary outcome. So mainly it is the researcher point of view, what he is looking at the end of the study becomes the primary outcome and secondary outcome. And S stands for study design. That means what type of study we are looking at. So this is the PICOS. So any research question should have all these elements, then it is completed. It is completed. Okay. So before going in depth analysis, we will take 5 examples of small research questions and analyze this PICOS in these 5 research questions, so that it will be easy for you and you tend to solve this one. So try to attempt this one, whether it is right or wrong, don't bother it, because in the beginning some things might go wrong, but fine, it is not a problem. Okay, so you start working along with the example. So first we will see 5 research questions. Okay, so research question 1. What are the etiological factors of dental trauma? So the question is very simple, and I want to keep it very small question. That's why the first research question I have given a simple question. So what are the etiological factors of dental trauma? So in this, what is the problem we are looking at? And you know that this is not an intervention. So we are looking at etiological based study, and then what are the comparison and what are the outcomes and what are the study designs. So you just write it in your paper. Then in the next slide, I will show that what we are looking in this research question. Okay, so it will be easy if you're not writing it and it looks very dry for you, and it will become a very monotonous type of presentation. Okay, so try to write it along with me. So I'll show in the next slide. So we are concentrating on a problem or a patient with dental trauma. Etiological agents, we are looking what are the etiological agents. We are not comparing anything. There is no comparison. And outcome, we are looking what are the etiological agents of dental trauma. Again, study design also has not been defined in this. So it's a very simple question where we are looking for etiological agents for dental trauma. So problem is dental trauma, and outcome we are looking at etiological agents for the dental trauma. So this is the article which has been published. So etiological factors and clinical evaluation of restored fractured anterior teeth, an observational study. So in this study, they were looking at what are the etiological factors for dental trauma, and once that fractured tooth is there, once they restored that anterior tooth, and how that anterior teeth clinically behaves after restoring. So this is an etiological based study. So a very simple study. They are finding out what are the etiological factors, and once it is restored, how the clinically restored teeth are there as an observational study. Okay, this is a first question. Then we'll go to the research question 2. In this question is, what is the accuracy of cone beam computed tomography and conventional radiography on detection of apical periodontitis? So I'll repeat the question. What is the accuracy of cone beam computed tomography and conventional radiography on detection of apical periodontitis? So this is my research question. So in this question, it is clearly defined what we are looking at and what we are aiming at. So you have a patient in this, and you have a diagnostic agent in this diagnostic system, and then you have comparing with the another system, and again you are looking what outcome you want. So all 4 criteria has been defined. So try to answer this one. I'll show it in the next slide. What are those PICO? But I have not mentioned anything about the study design. So don't worry about the study design. You won't get any study design for this at this level. So at the next level, I'll talk about the study design. So what is the accuracy of cone beam computed tomography and conventional radiography on detection of apical periodontitis? So we'll go there. So we are looking at patients who are having apical periodontitis, patients with apical periodontitis, and the diagnostic test is cone beam computed tomography, that is CBCT, and then we are comparing with conventional radiography, and the outcome what we are looking is assessment of location and extent of apical periodontitis. So in this study, how accurately the CBCT or the conventional radiography is providing the location and the extent of the apical periodontitis. The problem we are chosen here is apical periodontitis, and we want to know how exactly it is and how much it is extended. So that is what is our outcome. So we are looking at where it is and how much it is extended. So in that, how good is CBCT and how good is conventional radiography? So in this study, it is clearly mentioned the problem and the diagnostic test and with which it is compared and what is the outcome for that. So all these things are clearly mentioned in this. So we'll go to the article now. So when you look at the article, it is a diagnostic accuracy of cone beam computed tomography and conventional radiography on apical periodontitis, a systematic review and meta-analysis. So it is very clear that it is a diagnostic based study only. You're looking at a diagnostic agent, and the study design, when you look at the article, you know the study design, that it is a systematic review and meta-analysis. So in this, we are finding out the accuracy levels of cone beam computed tomography and conventional radiography for detection of apical periodontitis. So we'll go to the third question. So the third question is, what is the effect of occlusal reduction on post-operative pain in patients with symptomatic irreversible pulpitis and symptomatic apical periodontitis? So I'll repeat the question. What is the effect of occlusal reduction on post-operative pain in patients with symptomatic irreversible pulpitis and symptomatic apical periodontitis? So in this question also, we are looking at patients with symptomatic irreversible pulpitis and symptomatic apical periodontitis. So patient problem is clearly defined, and what intervention we are doing is defined, and comparison is not seen in the question, but outcome is seen. So you can write what are the patient or problem You can write what is the intervention. You can write what is the comparison, what is the outcome. Okay, so I'll go to the next slide. So patient or problem is patients with symptomatic irreversible pulpitis and symptomatic apical periodontitis. And what is the intervention given? You have given an occlusal reduction. When you have done an occlusal reduction on these type of patients, what is the post-operative pain? So you have done an occlusal reduction. So most probably the comparison will be no occlusal reduction. And then outcome, what we are looking at is evaluation of post-operative intensity. So the patients who are suffering with symptomatic irreversible pulpitis and symptomatic apical periodontitis, when you have done an occlusal reduction, what is the post-operative pain intensity? That is what you are looking. So problem is there, intervention is there, and outcome is also there. But study design is not clearly there. But we'll go to the title. When we go to the title, now you can see evaluation of post-operative pain intensity following occlusal reduction in teeth associated with symptomatic irreversible pulpitis and symptomatic apical periodontitis, a randomized clinical study. So in the article, we know that it is a randomized clinical trial. So study design is there in the title, but you have all the elements in this. The exposure is occlusal reduction. Outcome, what you are looking at is post-operative pain intensity. The problem or the patients you are studying is symptomatic irreversible pulpitis and symptomatic apical periodontitis. So all the elements are seen. So when all these elements are seen in that research question, it is very much clear that what you are looking at and what you are what problem you are studying or what intervention you are giving and with what you are comparing. So the researcher knows what he is doing. The researcher clearly knows what he is doing. So whenever you are framing a research question, try to incorporate all these things in your research question and then go to your guide. So that the guide also knows what you're clearly looking in that, and they know that you have done a preliminary search on the study, what you are doing. So we'll go to the next research question. So the fourth one is, I'm given the article first. Instead of giving the question, I have given the article first. We'll see what is the research question based on the article. What are the outcomes and prognostic factors that influence the success of tooth autotransplantation in children and adolescents? So title of the article is Outcomes and Prognostic Factors that Influence the Success of Tooth Autotransplantation in Children and Adolescents. So the research question is, what are the prognostic factors that influence the success of tooth autotransplantation? From that question, we frame, instead of giving the question first, I have given the title for one example. So what are the prognostic factors that influence the success of tooth autotransplantation? So what is the problem here? Even though the problem is not seen here, but on the background, you can understand what is the problem. So the problem, why do you do a autotransplantation? We do a autotransplantation when there is a missing teeth. So ultimately the problem here is missing teeth. So the problem, what we are studying here is, even though it is not seen directly in the question, but you can understand by seeing the question. So what are the prognostic factors that influence the success of tooth autotransplantation? So the problem is missing teeth. We are looking at the prognostic factor. What all the prognostic factors that help in the success of autotransplantation? The prognostic factor may be defined in the article, like stage of the root development and the age of the patient, gender, all these things will be there. So they are looking at different prognostic factors which helps in the success of the auto transplantation. So the study design again is not given in the article. When you go into the abstract, you can find out the study design. So this is my fourth question. Then we'll go to the fifth question, which is an in vitro study. It is an in vitro study. The fifth question is, what is the efficacy of wave 1 gold and wave 1 retreatment files? What is the efficacy of wave 1 gold and wave 1 retreatment files? So this is my fifth question. Here again, we don't know what type of study design we are doing here, but still we'll go to the PICOs. So the problem is teeth with obturation. The intervention you are giving is wave 1 gold with 1, and comparison you are giving is wave 1. So outcome you are looking at, what is the efficiency of these systems in retreatment using micro CT and confocal microscopy, and the study design is in vitro study. So when you have an obturated teeth, you need to remove that obturation because of the failure of the endodontic treatment. So which system, like wave 1 gold or wave 1, which is efficient in removing those gutta percha? So this is the title. Comparison of efficiency of the retreatment procedure between wave 1 gold and wave 1 system by micro CT and confocal microscopy and in vitro study. So it is clearly know that they are comparing two systems, wave 1 gold and wave 1, and they are finding out which system is good enough for the retreatment procedure and looking at outcome with the help of micro CT and confocal microscopy, and which is an in vitro study. So all the elements are seen in this topic. So they are looking at an extracted teeth and how good is wave 1 gold or how good is wave 1, and finally evaluating the outcome with the help of micro CT and confocal microscopy. So this is when you are looking at the question, you should know what is the problem we are looking at. You should know either intervention or the etiological agent or the diagnostic factor or the prognostic factor we are looking in that study, and are we comparing with any other thing, and what are the outcome we are looking at. So when you look at the 5 questions, all 5 questions are a different question. The first one I asked about etiological agents, and the second one I asked about diagnostic test, and the third one I spoken about intervention, and the fourth one I've spoken about prognosis, and the fifth one is in vitro. So all 5 questions I've spoken are different types of questions. One is a causation related question, other one is diagnosis based question, third one is therapy based question, fourth one is prognosis related question, and fifth one is in vitro study. So you should know that what you are looking at. Are you doing an etiological based study, or are you doing a diagnostic based study, or doing a therapy? You are giving a therapy and finding out there, or are you looking at a prognosis? Therapy and prognosis are almost similar, but the outcome what you look at makes the difference. Outcome what you look at makes the difference. For example, I say that what is the post-operative pain in single visit root canal therapy with ProTaper Next and ProTaper Gold. So that becomes a therapy related. But if I say that what is the prognosis of the tooth if I do with ProTaper Next and ProTaper Gold after 1 to 2 year follow-up, it becomes a prognosis related. So the therapy, in the prognosis also you give an intervention, in the therapy also you give an intervention, but the outcome what you are looking makes the difference for therapy and prognosis. That you should, over a period of time, you can understand that difference. That is not a big problem. So in the first part, I have discussed about 5 research questions and what are those 5 different research questions, whether it is a causation related one, or whether it is a diagnosis related one, or whether it is a therapy or intervention related one, or it is a prognosis related one, and then whether it is an in vitro study. Okay. So what type of question we have done. The next one, we have to see what are the different types of study design. So the question can be in any of this one, therapy or diagnosis or prognosis or etiological based or in vitro. But what are the study design? That is our next part. So when you look at the study types and levels of clinical evidence, there are different types of studies. You have an in vitro research from the end, from the base of the triangle. You have an in vitro research, animal research, and your ideas, editorials or opinions, and your case report, and your case control studies, and your cohort studies, and your randomized control trials, and your meta-analysis and systematic reviews. So please make a note of it. So this is the level of evidence. These are the different types of studies that are there. And with the level of evidence, highest evidence is given to meta-analysis, systematic reviews, and then randomized clinical trials. And the next level is observational studies, that is cohort studies and case control studies. And the next level is your case reports. And the next level is your ideas and opinions. And the last levels are animal research and in vitro research. So highest level of evidence is at systematic reviews and meta-analysis, and the lowest level of evidence is at your in vitro research. So, sir, if you ask me a question, sir, is that in vitro research is very bad to do? No, but sometimes to start to go to a systematic review, unless you don't have an in vitro research, you cannot go to a next level, especially in dentistry. Especially in dentistry, we need an in vitro research. Then only we can go to a next level. But you have to weigh that if that research has been addressed adequately in vitro levels, better not to take that type of research just for the sake of doing the study, because you're wasting a lot of your resources, your money, your valuable time, and your valuable energy. So for just sake of doing the dissertation, sake of doing a paper or a poster presentation, changing one instrument, already article is there, they say that they have done AB instrument, I'll do with C. So that doesn't make much difference. You're wasting your valuable resources, your money, time, everything. So if you're doing an in vitro research, pay attention, see that adequate data has been published or not. If adequate data has been published, better go to another study. Okay. So this is the level of evidence. So you have a different study designs now. So previously I've spoken about questions and I was talking about study design. Now again we will go to each study design and then we will address one question again in that, so that you will become familiar with study designs also. So for example, I'll take a small example. Previously I told that we have taken wave 1 gold and wave 1 system to see the efficacy of retreatment in extracted teeth. The same example I can show you here in different study design. So if at all I take wave 1 gold and wave 1, and in extracted teeth, I do an obturation and remove the GP with these two systems, that becomes an in vitro study. Instead of that, I take a case who reports with failed endodontic therapy. I remove a GP with wave 1 gold, and in another case, I remove a GP with wave 1 or only with wave 1 gold, and I report. That becomes a case report. There, I'm not stating anything what the patient complained of. I'm not looking any other criteria. Patient has reported with so and so pain, and I've used wave 1 gold and removed the GP. If I do a 5 to 6 cases, that becomes case series with wave 1 gold. That becomes a case series with wave 1 gold. If at all I want to study, you don't get, in this example, you cannot correlate with case control studies. That's why I am not saying with case control study. You can go with cohort study. What I can do is, over a period of 1 year, whatever failed root canal therapy is coming to my clinic or to my postgraduate clinic department, all the things I'll retreat with the wave 1 gold. I'll just take a data. 50 patients has come, 35 to 45 years age group, 10 patients are there. 45 to 55 year age group, 20 patients are there. Male, so many patients. Female, so many patients. upper molar so many teeth, lower molar so many teeth, preoperative condition, pain is there, no pain, sinus tract, all these criteria I will evaluate. And finally, I'll come to a conclusion. If male, how many having post-operative pain, female, how many are having post-operative pain, upper molar is having more pain or lower molar is having more pain, and wave one gold, how much time it is taking to remove the JP. So I'm looking at a cohort, a group of failed root canal therapy patient, and using a wave one gold to remove the GP or to remove this, to do this retreatment and addressing this system with this cohort study. So in this, you don't define anything, but you observe it. That's why it is called as observational study. You're observing. So whoever is coming to you with a pain, you do that. You don't keep a time limit, age limit or anything. And then finally you get some conclusion, but on a larger population you are doing. That is cohort study. But if the same thing I go with randomized control trial, what I'll do is I'll take a strict protocol of define the condition properly. Whoever is having preoperative pain with failed root canal therapy of age group of 25 to 45 years, then only I will recruit. So like that, you will define the criteria and then you will recruit 40 patients, and then two groups you will divide. One group you will give it to wave one gold and one group you will give it to wave one. But you don't know which group you are doing with wave one gold and wave one until and unless you are starting your retreatment protocol. Then once you, now I'm starting my retreatment protocol, then only another person will tell this patient you have to do with wave one gold. Then second patient also you don't know. Then when you are doing the retreatment, then only the other person will tell, no, you have to do again with wave. So you have something called as a randomization and allocation concealment and operation bias, operation concealment, everything will be there. So that's why randomized clinical trial keeps risk of bias eliminated. So the low risk of bias will be there. So that is called as randomized clinical trial. And instead of, when I have 10 to 15 randomized clinical trials along with wave one gold already published in Italy one study, and in Spain one study, and in US one study, and in India one study, instead of going again a randomized clinical trial, I'll compile all this data and report a review that becomes my systematic review. That becomes my systematic review. If at all, I feel that analysis can be done again on a common criteria, that becomes a meta-analysis. If I do a statistical analysis for those data again, that becomes my meta-analysis. So the same example from the in vitro level to the systematic review level, I've given an example how you can do. So now you can see that if I say about something about the wave one gold or wave one, now we know that if we go with the meta-analysis, we know that, so what is the data in that? So it's just an example I'm quoting. There is nothing affiliation with any of the companies for me. To understand, I'm just quoting this example, okay? And then we will go with each study design, okay? So in vitro studies or laboratory studies, a protocol need to be developed still, what criteria should be followed. So that it is in developing stage. We'll get a protocol for in vitro studies soon. So, and I've already discussed the previous in vitro study, so I'm not taking any example in vitro study right now. Next one is animal research. If at all doing an animal research, you have a checklist for that. You have a checklist for that. It is called as ARRIVE checklist. It is called as ARRIVE checklist. Animal research reporting in vivo experiments. This is ARRIVE checklist. ARRIVE checklist. You have to need to follow ARRIVE guidelines when you are doing this. So this is ARRIVE checklist. So when you are doing an animal research, you have to keep this checklist. You know how the title should be, how the abstract should be. They have given all the criteria and how it should be the introduction and what is the background, what are the objectives and what are the methods and what ethical statement you need to follow and what study design and experimental procedures. All these details are given neatly. And what about the housing and the husbandry, what sample size, everything is clearly defined. So you have to answer those questions properly, and that becomes your study design. So when you are doing a animal research, keep this arrive checklist and do your protocol write-up. Okay. So that's about the animal research. And the next one is case report. A case report is nothing but it only demonstrates a clinical event of interest that is possible. And in a case report, there is no control of treatment assignment or endpoint assignment or confounders. So that is, there is no control group for the sake of comparison. So you're not comparing anything. You're just documenting a case that you have done a treatment. That's all. So that's why you have a lot of bias in that. So case series are the simplest form and follow the clinical course of a particular condition in a group of individuals. A case series carries more weight than a single case report, but cannot prove efficacy of a treatment. And case series and case reports are susceptible to large selection bias, because you may show a bias. You may take a less difficult case and demonstrate that case, because selection is there in your hand and you are not having any selection bias in that. So there is a lot amount of selection bias will be there. That's why cases cannot be proven as an efficacy for a treatment. Okay. So if you are doing a case reports, what are the checklists that you need to follow? You need to follow care checklist. That is a care checklist, case report guidelines. You have a care checklist. You have done a good case and you feel that you want to share that information in the publication way, then take this care checklist, keep it with you and discuss all the elements what has been asked in the care checklist. That will be easy for you. So in the care checklist, they'll tell you how the title should be written and what are the keywords for it, and how the abstract has to be written, and what are the patient information that you need to be shared, and what is the clinical findings you have seen, and what is the diagnostic assessment you have carried out, and what is the therapeutic intervention, and what are the follow-up and outcomes, and what are the discussion. So this is called as care checklist for writing a case reports and case series. So this, I repeat again, the name of the checklist is care checklist. So that's about the case reports. What are the future research areas in this case reports? If you are doing a novel technique which is not described anywhere, then you cannot expect something to be done in a larger population. So you have to do with case reports or case series, or any novel technique or any newer material where much research has not been done. So you have to go with case reports. For example, guided endodontics, which is at a initial stage of research, very few case reports has been published. In that case, if you are doing, you can do a case report or case series. And regenerative procedures, again, a lot of case series are there. But again, if at all you feel that to add some more data on those case series, you can look at the regenerative procedures on case series and case report. These are the research areas which you can concentrate for case reports and case areas. Okay. So the next one is observational studies. Okay. Before going to observational studies, we'll take a small break, and I want to introduce about a small event which is taking place in online next week, that is a Old Endodontic Congress, IFEA 2020, which is a very big event, and you have around 25 speakers over a span of 4 days with 25 lectures, and it's a very great event. So I want to share that video in this break time. Please go through this. So I'll hand it over to Sumuk, Dr. Sumuk, to play that video.
Dear friends, on behalf of the International Federation of Endodontic Association and the organizing team of IFIA 2020, it is my pleasure to welcome each one of you to one of the world's biggest online endodontic congress. If you want to have an overview of the current and future trends in clinical endodontics, if you are passionate about endodontics, if you aspire to evolve to be a quality conscious endodontist, and if you want to be inspired by inspirational mentors, then IFIA 2020 would be a must-attend event. On a personal note, one of my magical moments in my journey of life was to meet and listen to Dr. John Ingle during the IFIA World Endodontic Congress held at Greece in 2010. To get his autograph was an absolute fanboy moment. This truly is the purpose of a World Congress, uniting the world and connecting the seekers with mentors. IFIA 2020 would comprise of two phases. Phase 1 would be from September 23 to 26, 2020, and would have 25 online webinars, including 19 video demonstrations from speakers from across 6 continents. Phase 2 would be held as an on-site congress next year at Chennai during August 12th to 14th, 2021. You as a delegate or a student have the flexibility to attend just the online congress this year, or also choose the option to attend both the congresses for the price of a single congress. The organizing team from Chennai and India are excited to organize this magnificent event that has taken 30 years to come to Indian shores. So welcome to IFIA 2020 and welcome to India, a land known for its mystical heritage and magical hospitality. Friends, see you soon.
Welcome back. It's a very great event, so don't miss this opportunity. At the price of one conference, you are attending 2. One is an online, another one is on-site. So you for PG delegate, I think it's around 5,900. It's almost a travel expense. You are sitting at your home and listening to the whole conference. So pay attention to it. Register for it. Okay. So we'll go to the next one. That's about observational studies. In observational studies, we have cross-sectional studies, case control studies, and cohort studies. We'll go to each study and we'll take one research question and address that research question in each study. So cross-sectional studies, it is the simplest form of an observational study, and it is also called as prevalence study. And if the sampling methodology is accurate, results can be projected to the entire population, and it saves on time and resources, but provide very little information about natural history of disease and incidence of illness. So it's the simplest form of observational study, and it is also called as prevalence study. So we'll take first research question in the cross-sectional study. So what is the prevalence of periapical and endodontic status in type 2 diabetes patients when compared to normal patients? So I'll repeat the question. What is the prevalence of periapical and endodontic status in type 2 diabetes patients when compared to normal patients? So the problem is periapical and endodontic status in population. So periapical and endodontic status, and you are looking at type 2 diabetic patients and comparing with normal. Okay, outcome is how do you looking at the periapical and endodontic status. So we'll go to the thing. So problem is periapical and endodontic status in type 2 diabetes patient, and observation is periapical and endodontic status in type 2 diabetes patient, and comparison is you're comparing with normal patient. In normal patients, how it looks, and the outcome what you are looking at, how you are looking, checking the periapical status using, you're using with periapical index scoring levels, that is PAI index scoring levels. So the study design here is, it's a cross-sectional study. The study design here is, it is a cross-sectional study. We'll go to the title. So periapical and endodontic status of type 2 diabetic patients in Catalonia, Spain, a cross-sectional study. So this is a cross-sectional study where whoever is coming to the department, they'll take a data, and then if they are diabetic, they look at the X-ray or RVG and score it with PAI index, and in the normal patient they do and find out the prevalence. So this type of study and data on this one is enormous. It's already many studies have been published on diabetic and non-diabetic. Okay, so if you are looking a similar type of cross-sectional study, better not to take diabetic. You take any other diseases which is not investigated till now, and you feel that that is added advantage to the field of endodontics, then interpret that one, that becomes a novel study. Interpret that one in the cross-sectional study, that becomes a novel study. So the next one is case control study. So this is a retrospective study, and it is used to test the hypothesis, and it is basically a comparison study, and the focus is on a disease or some other health problem that has already developed. So you are looking at one case or a disease that has already developed, and you are looking at normal. So that's why it is a comparison study, that is called as a case control study. So we'll go to the question, you'll understand it better. What is the correlation between pulp stones and gallbladder stones? So what is the correlation between pulp stones and gallbladder stone? So the patients who are having gallbladder stones, those patients is having pulp stone. You are looking at a correlation. So the cases will be patients with gallbladder stone and normal patient. And for these things, does the pulp stones is similar or not? So whoever will go to the PICOS. The problem is the correlation between pulp stones and gallbladder stone. Case is patients with gallbladder stones and comparing with patients without gallbladder stone. So that means if you take one case with gallbladder stone, and you have to take 2 or 3 cases without gallbladder stone, and then you have to confirm it. That ratio you have to determine based on the sample size, and the outcome you have to evaluate what is the prevalence of pulp stones in patient with gallbladder stones in comparison with control population. So assumption is when you have a stone, gallbladder stone or a renal stone, is there any chance of getting pulp stones in those patients? So instead of doing it in patient, and when you're doing those type of patients root canal therapy, if the data is clear that you have chances, means then you can predict that pulp stones can be expected since the patient is having an history. So you will take a necessary precaution. To rule out that one, you have to do a case control study. That means you will take some patients with gallbladder stones and some normal patient and check a radiographic thing whether the pulp stone, whether the pulp is normal or it is receded. So that is a case control study. We'll go to the title. So correlation between pulp stones and gallbladder stones, a radiographic retrospective case control study. So they have taken a radiographic data which is present in their department, from there they would have analyzed that pulp stones are present or not. Similarly, you have a title already published related to the pulp stones and renal stones also. You have a title published related to the pulp stones and renal stones. So this is a published, you have a systematic review also on renal stones correlation with the pulp stone. So if you are looking some other thing, you feel that that disease has a weightage or a link with your endodontic therapies or endodontic thing, you can look into those things. The next one is cohort study. Cohort is defined as a group of people who share a common characteristic or experience within a defined period of time. So normally for a group of people who is having the same disease, when you're studying that group, that becomes a cohort. So cohort studies are basically three types. It is a prospective cohort, and it is a retrospective cohort, or a combination of both. So I'll deal with both first and second one in this presentation. We'll go first with prospective cohort study. Prospective cohort study. What is the success and survival rates of endodontically treated teeth, coronally restored cracked teeth? That means when you have a cracked teeth and it is endodontically treated, what is the success and survival rate of that endodontically treated teeth? So what is the success and survival rate of endodontically treated, coronally restored cracked teeth? So we'll go to the PICOS. So you address it now. What is the patient here? What is the intervention, comparison, outcome? Population is patients with cracked teeth. Intervention is endodontic treatment in cracked teeth. Comparison is nil. Outcome is success of treatment. This is one good area of prospective cohort study. You are not worried about compared to things, because you don't need to compare with any other thing. You are just looking at cracked teeth. You want to do a root canal therapy and look at that. What is the success in that? So whoever patient reports with a cracked teeth into your department, say for around over a period of 6 months or 1 year, take those things, take those patients and treat them and have a follow-up. Follow-up period, ideally speaking, 1 year is good enough, but if you're not able to complete it, since time, you can have 6 months and ask your juniors to follow up. That becomes a department study again. Okay, so in this, as a part of your curriculum, you're doing it to your root canal therapy and it is normal, but you're having a data. What patient, what age group, what is the reason of cracked teeth, if at all patient knows, and which tooth is that, and what is the extent of the crack. All these things you are taking pre-operatively, and you are treating the tooth and giving and restoring it back and send back the patient. Again, you're calling back after 3 months, 6 months and 1 year follow-up, and you're looking at the success. And what is the success of the treatment, what you have given? Any teeth has been lost or fractured again, or needs an extraction, or no need, it is surviving, it is good enough. Then you know that what is the problem in that. So this is also some things which you feel that you want to excel in that. You can take that group and during your PG curriculum, you can address that problem. So the similarly prospective cohort study, for example, in conservative point of view, you have a veneers, you don't get much veneers, but you can take around the discolored teeth of 5 to 6 patients, and 3 months or 6 months time period, you can do a veneers, different types of veneers which is suited for that patient, and evaluated at 6 months and 1 year time period. Done, because you've learned the thing of treating the discolored patient, that itself gives a added advantage and it improves your clinical skills. And since it's a cohort study, and you have a weightage again, and that easy to project for your examiner and easy to get a publication also. Okay, so we'll go to the prospective cohort study, the previous one, success and survival of endodontically treated cracked teeth with radicular extension, a 2 to 4 year prospective cohort study. So this is the prospective cohort study which I discussed earlier. Okay, we'll go to the next one, that is retrospective cohort study. So retrospective cohort study, the research question is, what is the success or clinical outcomes of multiple visit non-surgical root canal retreatment? So you look at again what is the success or clinical outcome of multiple visit non-surgical root canal retreatment. So the problem is, even though it is not given, it is failed endodontic therapy is the problem, and intervention what you are giving is multiple visit non-surgical root canal therapy, comparison nil, and outcome is success of non-surgical root canal retreatment based on periapical index. So again, a prospective, this was a retrospective cohort study. They have taken their department data and doing that. So clinical outcomes of non-surgical multiple visit root canal retreatment, a retrospective cohort study. But their department might be having those data, whatever retreatment has been done with non-surgical multiple visit. So they are analyzing that retrospective data and then done this study. A similar study, one of my PG student is doing now for our dissertation. We are doing it as a prospective cohort study, studying the analysis of retreatment. That means whoever is coming to the department with failed root canal therapy, that PG will take that retreatment and just look at that findings, how good it is and any problems are there, all those things. So a cohort study only we have done. We have registered with the cohort study only. So when you are doing observational studies, either a case control study, cross-sectional study, or cohort study, you have a checklist that is called as STROBE checklist. STROBE. It's called a STROBE checklist. Strength of reporting of observational studies in epidemiology. This is a STROBE checklist. Strength of reporting observational studies in epidemiology. So this is a STROBE checklist. So in this checklist, you have all the things. What is the introduction and background? What is the study design? Participants, variables, what you are looking, data sources and biases. All these things has been explained in this checklist. Once you address this checklist, done. Your study design is done. So whenever you're planning for particular study design, you keep this checklist along with you and go with this checklist. Then it is easy for you to do the study and for sending it to the publication also. And if you're sending it publication, you can write it in the publication itself that you have followed the STROBE checklist to write this paper. That gives weightage for you. So this is for observational studies, STROBE checklist. So what are the future research areas in this? Take a department data on endodontic surgery or other aspects where you can plan retrospective study. For example, apicectomy or root end filling in root end surgeries, if it is done, you have a data in the department, you can do a retrospective cohort study. Or you're planning for a prospective cohort study, any failed fracture class 2 restoration, you do a re-restoration. Don't put it particularly that you have to do with metal or you have to do with amalgam again. Whatever fractured class 2 restorations will be your cohort. And then you are doing with again with the different types of whichever is indicated for that particular tooth. If needed, you go with ceramic inlay or ceramic onlay or a metal inlay or a metal onlay over a period of 6 months of time, whatever cases is coming to you, that becomes a cohort prospective study. Or a retreatment in persistent apical periodontia, which I have already told that in our department we have taken this. So you will learn the technique and the same time you are doing a clinical study and you know how to take the data and you know how to take the case report, case history, and you know how to document it, how to take photographs. In one study, you are learning so many things which helps for you in your future for documentation also. So this is the research areas. You can define one area of interest that can be a discolored teeth or a class 2 restoration. You feel that you have very much interest in that, then take that and do a treatment for that in a period of 6 months or 1 year. That becomes a prospective cohort study. So we'll come to the next one, randomized clinical trials. A study in which people are allocated at random to receive one one of several clinical interventions, and one of these interventions is the standard of comparison or control. So in a group of population which are allocated at random to receive one of several clinical intervention, and one intervention should be of statistic or control. That becomes a randomized clinical trial. So we look at one example. What is the influence of instrument design on post-operative pain in single visit root canal treatment with ProTaper Next and VTaper 2H rotary system in symptomatic irreversible pulpitis of multi-rooted teeth? So everything is defined in this, and this is our department study. Last year the PG has passed out from the college. Last year he finished his exam and this got published. 2 months back this study got published. So population here is symptomatic irreversible pulpitis, and intervention we have given is intervention single visit root canal therapy with ProTaper Next rotary system, and we are comparing with single visit root canal therapy with VTaper 2H rotary system, and outcome we have assessed is assessment of post-operative pain. So we have defined everything, and the study design is randomized clinical trial. The study design is randomized clinical trial. So this is our study, influence of instrument design on post-operative pain in single visit root canal treatment with ProTaper Next and VTaper 2H rotary system in symptomatic irreversible pulpitis of multi-rooted teeth. So if we have taken a symptomatic irreversible pulpitis patient, and if you do with ProTaper Next and VTaper 2H, because of those instrument design, does they have any difference in post-operative pain? That is what our study. So this is a randomized clinical trial we have done in the department and got published. So randomized clinical trial. When you are doing a randomized clinical trial, make sure that you register the randomized clinical trial in CTRI. That means Clinical Trial Registry of India. Without registering the clinical trial, don't start your randomized clinical trial, because after finishing the randomized clinical trial and you are going to publish it, any journal will ask you that whether you have registered your trial, provide the registry number. Without registry number, you cannot publish it. It becomes mandatory now that you have to register your randomized clinical trial with any of your registration. In India, it's better to go with CTRI. That is Clinical Trial Registry of India. I'll show that one. So this is the CTRI data set and description. You just type CTRI, you get that website. You have these questions in that. You address those questions and upload those questions in the website, and they will check it and give a number to you. Once that number is allotted, then you can go ahead. Previously, they were accepting retrospective studies, but now they are not accepting. You have to register it, and then only you have to start the study. If you start the study, they are not accepting it. So keep it in mind. If you are planning for a randomized clinical trial, unless and until you register with CTRI, don't start the study. That number is needed for your publication. That number is needed for your publication. So this is a website, and when you are doing the CTRI registration, the guidelines which you need to follow for randomized clinical trials is CONSERT guidelines. CONSERT guidelines, that is Consolidated Standard of Reporting Trials. Consolidated Standard of Reporting Trials. This is the CONSERT checklist. CONSORT, Consolidated Standard of Reporting Trials. So when you are doing a randomized clinical trial, you need to follow the CONSERT checklist, and you have a CONSERT flow diagram, and you have to follow this checklist, and you have to do your study and then publish it. When you are doing a randomized clinical trial, you have to evaluate that risk of bias with the help of Cochrane risk bias tool. This is the Cochrane risk bias tool for randomized controlled trials. If you have your trial with low risk of bias, it has a high strength. If the study is low risk, you have a high strength. How do you determine that risk of bias? You have a Cochrane risk of bias tool. For that, you have random sequence generation, and then allocation concealment, and then selective reporting, and then other bias, that is bias due to problems not covered elsewhere, and blinding of participants and personnel, and blinding of outcome assessment, and incomplete outcome data. These things need to be addressed properly in your randomized clinical trial. Then the trial becomes low risk of bias. Then the trial becomes low risk of bias. If your trial becomes a low risk of bias, then that will become a good quality or a high quality of the study. That becomes a high quality of the study. So for randomized clinical trials, you have to register first with CTRI and then go with the CONCERT checklist. So this is the CONCERT checklist and CONCERT flow diagram. So we'll come to the last part of the presentation, that is systematic reviews and meta-analysis. A systematic review is a type of literature review that collects and critically analyzes multiple research studies or papers. So when statistical analysis is done for these reviews, that is called as meta-analysis. Okay, so when you have a data of many randomized clinical trials has been published on that particular data, so you take all those randomized clinical trials and conduct a review, that becomes your systematic review. And when you do analysis for that, that becomes a meta-analysis. We'll go with an example. And the same systematic reviews need not be collection of randomized clinical trials alone. You can collect all cohort studies and do a systematic review, or you can collect all cross-sectional studies and you can do a systematic review, or you can collect all case control studies and then you can do a systematic review. But the study should be of similar design. You cannot take one case control study and one randomized clinical trial, and you cannot take one cohort study and one cross-sectional study. If you are addressing a similar problem, take all those studies. For example, cohort, you have a retreatment cohort studies, take all retreatment cohort studies and do a systematic review. For example, you have a periapical index status in diabetic patient, take all those cross-sectional studies and do a systematic review. Likewise, all like studies, you have to compile it and do a systematic review. Don't compare one cohort with another cross-sectional. Okay, that is a wrong way. And for the systematic reviews, you have a checklist. I'll tell. First, we'll finish off the research question. What is the effect of preoperative use of corticosteroids on post-endodontic pain in patients with symptomatic pulpitis who underwent root canal treatment in single visit? So this is the research question. What is the effect of preoperative use of corticosteroids on post-endodontic pain in patients with symptomatic pulpitis who underwent root canal therapy in single visit? So this is also our department study, a systematic review. It got published in Journal of Endodontics. So we'll define the population. Patients with symptomatic pulpitis is the population, and the intervention is preoperative medication with corticosteroid and single visit root canal therapy. We have clearly defined all the studies who have done the single visit only were included in this, and we are compared with preoperative medication with placebo, or it can be any other drugs, and which has been completed in single visit root canal therapy. And the outcome what we have evaluated is post-endodontic pain. But in the article, we have clearly defined primary outcome as well as secondary outcome. Our primary outcome is excuse me, the percentage of patients reporting a clinically significant reduction in patient. That means how many percentage of patients have a clinically significant reduction in pain, and the difference in pain scores between groups measured using a validated pain scale, and the percentage of patients requiring rescue analgesic medication. That are our primary outcome. And the secondary outcome is what is the amount of analgesic medication that was needed, and thus any adverse effect were reported within the first 48 hours. So primary outcome is what is the percentage of patients pain reduction was seen, and what are the different pain scores in between the groups. And secondary outcome is what is the amount of analgesic medication was needed, and does any adverse effects has been reported. So this is our study. So this got published in Journal of Endodontics in the year 2018. So we have defined the population very precisely and addressed that single visit only, and those included articles we have taken and conducted this study. So if at all you are doing a systematic review, like randomized clinical trials, you are registering in CTRI, register your systematic review in Prospero registry. You type Prospero, you will get that registry in website. You go there and register your systematic review and then start your systematic review. Because when you are sending it for publication, you need to mention about the registry number in the publication. So without registry number, it is difficult to get published. So better to get registered first in the Prospero and then start your review. If at all you want to do the review, you have PRISMA checklist, primary reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. So PRISMA checklist. So this is the PRISMA checklist, that is primary reporting items for reporting systematic reviews and meta-analysis. In the PRISMA checklist, everything is clearly mentioned. What should be the title and abstract, introduction, and rationale and objectives, methods, protocols, what are the eligible criteria. All these things are clearly mentioned in this PRISMA checklist. So go to the PRISMA checklist and evaluate that one. If at all you are doing a observational studies meta-analysis, you have to follow Moose guidelines. Moose guidelines for meta-analysis and systematic reviews of observational studies. That means you are following case control or cohort, you have to follow Moose. If you are doing randomized clinical trials, you have to follow PRISMA. So these are the two checklists that are available for your systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Based on the type of the study, what you have chosen, you have to apply that checklist. Okay. So you have, when you want to search for the systematic reviews, Cochrane database is the available database, which is the evidence-based thing for the medicine and is the highest level of evidence. You can go to the Cochrane database and check systematic reviews of your area of interest. It is not for dentistry, it is totally for the medical field, Cochrane database, and it addresses every field in medicine, and it addresses every field in medicine. Another checklist is Quorum checklist, but usually we follow PRISMA, and even Quorum also can be followed. So, and the other one is diagnostic studies. For diagnostic studies alone, you have a separate checklist. This is one article of our department got published, assessment of pulp oxygen saturation levels by pulse oximetry for pulpal diseases, a diagnostic study. So if you are doing a diagnostic study, you have a start checklist. You have a start checklist. This is the start checklist for addressing the diagnostic studies. If you are doing any diagnostic study, this is the start checklist. So before we conclude this, how do you arrive for your topic, for your dissertation or any study? Just first take your area of interest. For example, you are very much interested in class 2 restoration or veneer preparations or root canal therapy or retreatment or endodontic surgery. You define your area of interest properly. It is the time you should concentrate on your area of interest. Once you define your area of interest, then choose that area and decide what study you want to do, whether it is an in vitro study or a clinical study. If you want to do an in vitro study, look at the latest articles about published data. you're planning to do an in vitro study on your area of interest and look at the published data. You look at methodology, materials used, and outcomes tested. Think to do different methodology and different outcomes that is not published. That in vitro study will have some weightage. If you are trying to follow the same methodology and outcome, that your paper doesn't carry weightage for publication. So if at all you are following a different methodology and different outcome, even it is an in vitro study, you always have a chance for publication. Okay. If not in vitro study, you are doing a clinical study, and then think about different study design, what you need to do. So you can do a cohort study, or you want to do an interventional study, that means a randomized clinical trial. So you think on that. If not, it is not an interventional based one, you are doing a case control, again it's a good. So take a case and a control and do an observational study. So as a PG student, choose 2 topics, one for your dissertation, one is for your paper or poster presentation. Keep your concentration on that and do that study with lot of interest and get published. That is your ultimate aim. When you're coming out of the institution, you have 2 publications and you know how to write a paper and how to publish it. So that makes that as a part of your PG curriculum, you have done a research, which is very much important. Then after your post-graduation, you can think whether you want to go with clinical or academics, even with clinical. So you need to have a documentation. After some years, you feel that you have done a technique. If you know that documentation, how to present it, how to share or how to publish the data, this research concept is very useful. So I'll conclude that my presentation today, that take your area of interest and work on that. That makes more useful for your future. So before concluding, I would like to remind about 12th World Endodontic Congress, and for Indian student member, it is 5,900 for registration. So if you are registering, you are going to hear around 25 lectures, and there is no travel expenses or lodging or hotel expenses here. You can sit and listen at your home. And the second part, in the July, next year July or 31st May, you will be another 5,900 for the on-site. So thank you for giving this opportunity to the JSS management, and I would like to thank Dr. Ravindra sir and Dr. Annapurna and my beloved friend Dr. Paras for inviting me for this lecture. I'll hand it over to Dr. Paras.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, madam. We can. You're audible.
Yeah, I'm audible. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sunil. That is a wonderful lecture on. It is a really enlightened on vast topics. How to go about selecting the topic, especially for the newcomers, the PG students. So hope this webinar will be very useful, fruitful for the postgraduate students in selecting the dissertation topic and also conducting a short studies. So let us not stop learning and utilizing the precious time in taking up research activities, and let's hope for the best. And all of you, I really thank all the participants, and also I could not able to welcome you earlier because of some technical issues with the device. So thank you, Dr. Sunil, once again, and it was very useful for us, even for me also. I was not knowing many things, which what are the checklists we have to go about for going for a publication and even for the selecting the research work. Thank you very much for your enlightening lecture on selecting the dissertation topic or research activities. Thank you once again. And over to Dr. Faris for proceeding the next webinar proceedings.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I hope the webinar would have cleared many doubts for the participants and will help in choosing and designing a concrete research study, because what I feel that most of the time a study has been selected, it may be a good topic, it may be a good study, but when they do the study, the methodology will have some drawbacks. And that is the reason most of the studies, though they are good, but the methodology is lacking concrete evidence. So it will be rejected at international level. So probably this would have cleared many of the doubts. And now we take up some question and answer session. Dr. Sunil, there are a few questions. Should I start sharing now?
Yeah, Bharat.
Yeah. The first question from Dr. Paromita Mazumdar. What about the laboratory-based studies? This has already been done, but this was asked in the early part of the webinar. So the doubt is like, what about the laboratory-based studies? So maybe the participant want to know about the studies. It was asked earlier. So if anything you want to add on that?
She was asking this question in the early part. After that,
yes.
This question has been addressed.
Okay. Then one more question from Dr. Ruchika. What is the difference between randomized clinical trial and randomized control trial?
Both are same, doctor. Previously, they used to call as control, but they now name it as clinical. In the control trial, they have one intervention and one control group. Now they say that if you have control also, you call it as randomized clinical trial. That's all. Both are one and the same.
Okay. One question from Ms. Priti Desai. Please explain what is a narrative review written on our subjects and how it differ from systematic review.
Basically, narrative review is like a review of literature. You are taking a topic and writing. You are not analyzing the data. Whereas systematic review, you will take a published data like randomized clinical trial or observational study, and you define your criteria. You have an eligibility criteria to include in that study. For example, in my example, when I take whoever has done a single visit and done a preoperative medication with corticosteroid, those studies only I'm writing it. Whereas in the narrative review, I can write about corticosteroids in general, but I don't have a randomized clinical trials like that. Whereas narrative review, it's like review of literature.
Yeah. Another question from the same participant. Minimum how much case follow-up is valid for publication? Maybe this is for case reports.
Okay, yeah, for up to 1 year is good enough. But they ask 18 months follow-up based on FDA criteria or USPHS criteria. When you're looking for any study for restoration like that, they ask for 18 months follow-up.
Okay. Anonymous question is there. Sir, can we conduct animal studies in Andhra Pradesh area? For example, if I'm conducting some studies on rat, is there any particular place or house where rats are available? I think this is regarding an ethical concern. Maybe you can answer it.
Exactly, I don't know the center in Andhra Pradesh, but there is a center in Chennai, but I don't know exactly where we can conduct an animal study in Andhra Pradesh.
Yeah, it requires a sophisticated environment where the animals are kept in a standardized condition and they should not be having any disease. One of a center is there in our facility. It is there in our facility actually. Animal is approved also by the government of India. And Lakshmi Deepa has asked, can we select systematic review or meta-analysis as thesis topic?
No, you cannot take a systematic review as a thesis topic because you have to do study, whereas this is not, we cannot say this as a original study. Most of the time it comes under review or it comes as a clinical research, but you cannot take a systematic review as your thesis topic, but you can take it as library dissertation. Yes. You have a library dissertation, you can take systematic review as a library dissertation and address that question.
Ma'am's Dr. Smita Durga Datta, ma'am has asked, will the notes for presentation be shared? Like maybe you can share the PPT. Ma'am is asking.
Yeah, I'll convert into PDF and I'll send it.
Okay. And there is a request like regarding the inputs on bibliographic analysis.
Recently, some articles have been published in Endo also about bibliographic analysis. Even I'm not very sure about that. What that analysis. I've seen few articles on bibliometric analysis, but even I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, some questions related to statistics, like regarding how to determine a sample size for in vitro study. Maybe it is not a part of the thing, but you can add some thoughts.
Actually, Paras, most of the time, my intention is about how to carry out the study design and defining the problem and how do you calculate that one. Even I am not good enough about the calculation of the power sample and all that. I always depend with other people, statistician,
Okay.
that is the correct person, because I'm not very deep in that. But if you know the problem and you are expressing that problem and you are designing, as a clinician, we should know this one. And I usually go with a statistician or refer the similar article published. If you're doing a study, when you like refer that similar article, and based on that sample size also we can go, but that is not authentic. Better to go with a statistician, and based on the OP in your department and the number of diseases coming, of particular disease coming to your department, your power sample will be calculated.
Yes. So because, yeah, as I told earlier, many of the studies are rejected because in the methodology, the sample is inadequate. So I think before doing a study, the power analysis has to be done and the sample size has to be concrete. Then one question is, what can be sample design size for a diagnostic study?
Again, it depends on the type of the disease, what you are looking. It is a very common or a rare one. If it is a common one, the sample size will be more. If it is a rare one, then the sample size will be less. So depending on that data, when you provide to the statistician, he will provide you the sample size for the diagnostic study.
Okay, one question is, sir, if we are going to give a therapy to a problem or patient and wait for the outcome, then is it RCT or cohort study?
No, when you are giving a therapy and you have two groups and you randomly allot that therapy into two groups, it's a randomized. When you are not randomizing, when you are not doing randomization and doing two treatments, that becomes an observation. You have randomly allotted. That means the operator should not know and the patient should not know what treatment you are doing. And you have to follow that. I've given some risk of bias too. When you are following that one, that becomes a randomized clinical trial. If you are not randomizing, that becomes observational study. That becomes a cohort study.
Yes. One question from Sai Karthik. Is there any comparison group in cohort studies?
Need not be.
Yeah,
it is not a must to have a comparison group.
Yes. Ma'am is asking Dr. Smita, can we keep publishing same case report with different timelines? Means the follow-up time. I think it's regarding the follow-up. Can we publish?
That means you have 1 year follow published, and again after 5 years you want to publish it.
Yes, yes.
It is up to the publisher whether they want to take it or not. We cannot, unless your technique is very novel and it is throwing a very good knowledge to the scientific literature, then you can expect it as a publication. It is up to the editorial board and peer review board as to think about that.
Yes. Then can you please explain the p-value that is used most of the times in study? This is a basically related to statistics. Then one question, does library dissertation applicable for publication?
Yeah, if you are taking a systematic review and you have done the systematic review, you can send it for publication.
Most of the questions are related to statistics, which I will not be able to ask the guest speaker now. So we'll go to more relevant study. Can systematic review be taken as a short study?
Yes, you can take
it can be taken.
Many people are presenting it in their paper and poster presentations at conference. Even last year, we have published 2 systematic reviews in conference.
Okay. One question is on sir, on what basis are thesis topics evaluated? Is it the topic selection or methodology? I mean, this is a relevant question because at the end, we just want to portray or showcase the study, what we have done. It's not to take the credit, but the objective is to contribute something to the literature. So the question is on what topics it has been evaluated?
See,
between selection and methodology.
Between selection. See, as a PG student, I told you before, you take the area of interest first. That gives more contribution. And if you feel that already data has been published, but how differently you are publishing again that data, you are looking it in a different perspective. For example, the same retreatment, what I have done in my department, if the same treatment was done in another department, the way they're projecting their data and the way I project my data, even though the treatment part is very similar, how you are portraying your data and what outcome you are looking at and what is the rationale behind your study makes it outstanding.
Yes. Yeah. One question from my colleague, Dr. Vinuta. She congratulates you for a brilliant presentation. Her doubt is can we take case control and cohort study as dissertation topics?
Yes.
Yeah, now maybe the question is like in the scenario where like we are going through this pandemic, students will be having the courage and the confidence to manage these cases, because that is one doubt which is there for a long time for me also.
That fear is there everywhere, not for case only. Even when you go to supermarket also, we have that fear. So that we cannot, if we are sitting alone in the room also, we are having that fear. So that is, it is not, it is applicable everywhere.
Okay.
So
Okay. Maybe we have to just ignore it and go ahead. It has to come down someday.
Yeah.
Difference between retrospective cohort and case control study.
In retrospective cohort, you don't have a disease one. Whereas in case control, you have a disease. You are particularly targeting one disease and you are comparing with the control. Whereas in retrospective cohort, you don't have a particular disease, either a retreatment or a periapical surgery or a fractured teeth. That is only your cohort, but you don't have a case.
Yes.
The disease is not there.
Yeah. One question like Simon. Yes.
Okay. Shall I intervene in between?
Yes, ma'am.
Paras? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Sunil, I have a question. Like, can you tell about what about the pilot study before taking up their selecting the topic or finalizing their topic for research work? Can they? Yeah, I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. What about the pilot study? They should do some pilot study before going for it. Is it necessary or essential to go for pilot study?
Ma'am, it is 100% essential, ma'am. Then only you know the loopholes in that study. Even a prospective study, if you are doing a retreatment, take 3 to 4 cases, ask them to do the retreatment. Then they know that whatever case history form they have prepared, what are the drawbacks in that, what things you have to improve in that. So it is needed, you have to go for pilot study, ma'am. If it is a clinical, we have to go for pilot study.
But for clinical to wait the result, it takes long duration. Before that one, they have to submit their synopsis for correction ethical committee. So it is a challenging for the student who is going to take the clinical trials for.
For clinical, ma'am, whatever we have taken the dissertation, around 12 randomized clinical trials, we have finished, ma'am. In conservative part, we have taken 1 year follow-up for the restoration. And for endo part, we have taken only 1 week follow-up, ma'am, post-operative pain. We have not taken long follow-ups. For dissertation point of view, we have not taken long follow-ups. So if you're taking 1 week follow-up, pilot study is not a problem, ma'am. 1 week follow-up, pilot study is not a problem. But you know, going with 1 year follow-up, pilot study is a problem. But you know the difficulties when you are doing an intervention.
Yes.
Till the follow-up, it's okay. But you know the difficulties in intervention. And for restorations, we will follow certain criteria, FDA criteria, USPHS criteria. So then we know how the operators will assess those criteria and all those things. So in the pilot, we cannot wait for 1 year follow-up.
That's true for especially for dissertation work. They can't wait for 1 year.
1 year follow-up, but we know the practical problems in intervention. So that part we can tell to the ethical committee, like pilot study has been done, but 1 year follow-up cannot be done. So we know that intervention part problems we can understand.
Okay, we can address the intervention problem. Okay.
So we have some more questions coming. Could we continue, Dr. Sunil?
Yes, doctor.
So our dean, Dr. Nandalal, has asked, do we still need to include studies on products which are no more in use when we conduct a systematic review? Maybe it is a product-based studies, and if we want to do some studies on those products, like some files are there or some intracanal medicaments are there, can we still do it?
Basically, when we are addressing a systematic review, that is a clinical point of view. We are addressing a clinical review. For example, that product is outdated and you are not using anymore. And when you are addressing that question, who is going to read and who is going to use it? Okay. So if for publication, we can write it. For example, when we look at in the endo literature, something old dated file, if you write it now, even I don't know whether the publisher will ask us. For example, I'll tell you one thing for us. Prevalence of MB2 canals in maxillary first molar in Indian population. This is the observational studies are there. And we have taken a systematic review. Okay. And last year at Chennai PG convention, PG got best paper. And she went for Vijayawada conference. and we have sent it for JOE. Almost six journals I have sent it. It got rejected. The reason I feel is, it is a known fact that prevalence of MB2, everyone knows that one. Everyone knows that what is the prevalence. So might be it is not an interesting fact for the editors. But I have done that study because I want to know in Indian population. I have collected the data, but still I am finding a journal to publish it. So I feel that why the journal has rejected that one is, might be they feel that there is no interesting factor to add to the literature.
Yes.
So I worked more than first review. I worked more than the 1.5 years for this review, and this got rejected.
Yes. Okay. One question is for a systematic review, if randomized trial number and 5 numbers are 5 for a systematic review, that means they have 5 studies, and cohort study they have 4. Then can we take both, or we have to take a single type of study? You told that we have to be similar studies. Yeah, always we have to. Yeah.
It is clear that randomized clinical trials are highest evidence. So when you have 4 or 5 randomized clinical trials, you go with randomized clinical trials. There is no point of taking cohort studies.
Yes. Okay. So, I think, I think we have answered majority of the questions. However, few questions, if they are there, you can communicate directly through the mail. And now I request Dr. Sunit to kindly give the vote of thanks, after which we shall be sharing a curtain raiser of the 12th IFIA World Endodontic Conference to be held in Chennai. So I request all of you to stay tuned. I request Dr. Sunit Shetty to kindly give the vote of thanks.
Seeking the blessings of His Holiness Jagat Guru Sri Shivratri Deshikendra Mahaswamiji. First of all, I would like to thank JSS University, JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research for giving us this opportunity to conduct these webinars. I extend my great thanks to Dr. Sunil for giving us this talk on selection of research topic. I would also like to thank our principal for his constant support and encouragement. Last but not least, I would like to thank our HOD for her guidance. And I would also like to thank all the technical team, Dr. Paras, Dr. Sumukh, Dr. Videsh, in conducting this webinar. Thank you one and all, and have a nice day.
So I would just like to, we would like to conclude, no research is ever quite complete. It is the glory of good bit of work that it opens the way for something still better, and this repeatedly leads to its own eclipse. So research doesn't mean that we have achieved everything. It is only a small drop which has been added to ocean. So we should be continuously doing this small bit of our work so that we can contribute some part to the literature. So I would like Dr. Sumukh to kindly play the curtain raiser for the 12th IFIA conference. And thank you all for being a part of this webinar, and we hope to see you soon for the coming webinars.
Okay, thank you, Paras. Thank you all for the participant. Thank you all the participants also. Thank you, Dr. Sumukh. Personally, I thank you, Dr. Sumukh.
thank you all. So any request for the PDF of the program, you can communicate with the concerned email ID. So we will share it with you from the speaker.
My mail ID is here. chinisk77@gmail.com. If they give mail, I'll send my PDF.
Okay, so you can contact the guest speaker for a PDF of the today's presentation. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Paras. Thank you, Dr. Sunil, Sunit, and Sunil, Chinni, and Sumukh. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, Paras, and thank you, sir, Ravindra sir, and Sumukh. Thank you very much for the coordination.
Thank you, Sunil.